I think the first step is really understanding that it's not normal to be stressed and tired all the time. This is a cultural construct, but it's actually not how our human animal bodies were designed. It's an epidemic that keeps women limited in what's possible for their life. So first step, it's not normal to be chronically stressed and fatigued. Second is, can I commit in some small way to bringing in a different rhythm, a quieting, a replenishment? And then when I'm in that different rhythm, can I face and be with whatever comes up? You cannot heal just by having insight and understanding. Full stop. Safety. And safety does not mean calm. We can feel really uncomfortable and our bodies still know we're safe. So it's not that we have to always be walking around the world in a zenned out, Buddha-like, calm demeanor. Can you even just name you're having a feeling? You don't need to have to know what the feeling is or the why of where it's coming from. And that's where someone might begin down a road of depression.
I went back and I held myself, like I hugged myself when I felt unsafe or felt alone.
About intuition, but it's basically the part of us that knows without knowing. And one of the ways we get unstuck is by nourishing ourselves with what we really need, not giving ourselves what we think we want. It's like a gym for the soul.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to our podcast, Soulful Us. Today, I welcome Dr. Kelly, and Dr. Kelly is a clinical psychologist, and she has been working in this field for over 2 decades. And she focuses on somatic healing, and she also helps people with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. I am so excited to have Dr. Kelly today in our episode and talk about healing. Hello, Dr. Kelly. Welcome to our show, Soulful Us. And today I'm going to dive straight in and ask you that the world is so uncertain right now, the news and so much is going on. So we feel so tired and exhausted and overwhelmed in our heads. So what do you think is actually going on underneath all of that stress?
A lot. And sometimes we don't even need to figure out the what of what's going on and instead come into our bodies and actually try to get underneath the mind and the stress that lives in thought. And some of the ways that I teach people in my therapy practice or in the group work I do is to, rather than asking themselves, what is this? Instead ask, where is this? Where in my body am I feeling this stress? Where in my body is there more of a concentration of contraction or tightness? And then to simply come in to the body through presence and through focused awareness and breathe into that place in the body. For many people, it tends to land in the back or the chest or the stomach. And so if I had someone I'm working with and they're saying, I'm so stressed, it's taking a toll on me, I feel depleted, and they could feel maybe a contraction or a tightness in their chest, I'd guide them for a couple minutes just to breathe there and be with the feeling. We're in a world where we're taught so much of our shifting our state is based on understanding or insight or thinking. That's important. That's part of it, but it's not all of it. Feelings, including stress, need to be felt in order to be released.
And most of us don't even know why we're feeling this. How will you address that if somebody is just living an unconscious life, going to work, they come back home feeling tired? Because as women, we have so many responsibilities and we cannot turn off when we come home even. We have kids, we have to cook, and we have to take care of our husbands, which are childlike. So like there's so many responsibility, and the one thing that we don't do is look after ourselves. What is your approach on that? What is the first step that someone can take towards more consciousness and more awareness?
I think the first step is really understanding that it's not normal to be stressed and tired all the time. We're conditioned to believe in a way that's normal. We're conditioned to operate more on output and performing and doing and caretaking than the alternative, which is input, receiving, nourishing, filling back up. So first and foremost, I want everyone to hear it is not normal to be stressed and busy and tired all the time. This is a cultural construct. It's the water we're all swimming in now, but it's actually not how our human animal bodies were designed to get through a day. Designed is to feel moments of stress, moments of having to be on heightened alert, moments of being extremely fatigued because of all the output, but then returning to a natural rhythm of slowing down, resting, and replenishing. So that's the first is probably the most common answer I get when I ask women how they're doing is busy and tired. It's an epidemic that keeps women limited in what's possible for their life. When we're chronically tired, we're living a half life. And so I think one of the most radical things we can do as women is own that this is not actually normal or a natural state and hold firm, hold a compassionate discipline to start taking better care of ourselves. There are so many ways to do it. And even if somebody has that pause in between getting off work and picking up their kids, there's that 30 seconds sitting in a car that rather than scrolling, which we're also conditioned to do to fill our time, close your eyes and breathe. And you ask, like, what if people aren't conscious and they don't know where their stress is coming from? When we get quiet, we start to hear what's been waiting to be heard. But that's not always comfortable for people to become more aware. So unconsciously, they do different things to not get quiet. So first step, it's not normal to be chronically stressed and fatigued. Second is, can I commit in some small way to bringing in a different rhythm, a quieting, a replenishment? And then when I'm in that different rhythm, can I face and be with whatever comes up?
Yeah. Like you'd said that we feel it in our body and not just in our mind. Like, what does that mean? I'm talking about healing. So healing is just not in the mind, but it starts from the body. Like, what does that mean?
The majority of our nervous system actually lives in our body, right? It's not really our brain. They communicate, but it's mostly actually in our area underneath our necks. And so many of us, because for many, many years, the way that we've moved through the world is very cognitive, intellectual, and mental. We've lost contact with how to embody being in the rest of our physical form. And so, yeah, it really is like, I'll tell you straight up, you cannot heal just by having insight and understanding. Full stop. And it's one of the reasons why I've actually transitioned away from doing one-on-one talk therapy and moved into other modalities like somatic or body-based practices, mindfulness-based practices, because I've seen understanding is really important as a foundation for healing, but it's step one. It's not the full story.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how you approach, because when we talk about the nervous system, regulating your nervous system, because most of the people don't even know. Yes, we're using the term nervous system and all of that, but for a person who is overwhelmed and anxious, what is the steps towards, like you mentioned, sitting in the car alone, but what would be the one step that would take it closer to the nervous system regulation? And what is that?
So I would put it, you could describe it very complex or very simple. If I were to say it at its most simple kernel, when we're talking about having a regulated nervous system, your body knows that in this moment, I am safe. In this moment, I am safe. And what's a trick is that our bodies, even if we can scan our environment and see that we're physically safe, emotional lack of safety lives in the body just like anticipating a physical threat. So if I'm feeling disconnected from a loved one, or I'm not feeling a sense of belonging in my community, different kinds of emotional lack of quote unquote safety, our nervous system is now activated into its survival strategies. And so that's a dysregulated nervous system. I'm not acting and living from my whole self that knows I'm safe. I'm acting and living from a much more narrow band of who I am that's only focused on keeping me safe. And when we're in the background, and when I say this, people don't understand because consciously they feel that they're safe. But there's these subtle little triggers in our world that emotionally might be signaling to our body that we're not safe. People have been impacted by remembering humans are herd animals, and we need to feel a sense of belonging in our tribe and being of value in our group in order to feel safe. So if there's something going on in the background where someone feels like they don't fit in, or they're not being seen and valued, that part of the brain that knows if I get kicked out of the tribe and I'm living on my own in the wilderness, I will be probably dead within the week,
Yeah.
gets activated. And now we're doing all these things to try and stay safe, which might mean people pleasing, or we're, shutting down our needs and feelings, whatever it might be, to belong and fit in.
Yeah.
So that is a dysregulated nervous
Okay.
system that's just trying to survive.
You said feeling safe. Why is it so important to change that? Like feeling safe. As a psychologist, how do you look at it?
When we don't feel safe, we become more primitive forms of ourselves. We start to engage more in our defense strategies rather than our authentic being and living. So a very common one for women is to become what we think other people want us to be. That is a consequence of not feeling emotionally safe in very subtle ways. And so having a sense of safety, and safety does not mean calm. There's a belief like, oh, if I feel safe, I must also feel calm. We can feel really uncomfortable and our bodies still know we're safe. So it's not that we have to always be walking around the world in a zenned out, Buddha-like, calm demeanor. We can be living in a lot of energy and different emotions, and our bodies still know we're safe. So it's the foundation of everything.
And feeling safe doesn't mean there needs to be physical violence, right? There can be
Right.
so many other types of emotional relationship with your partner or whoever you are around. And most of us, when we are growing up, we were not even allowed to talk about our emotions, right? And then we grow up to just learning that, because there is no difference now, because we don't even know what does that mean to feel safe. So how would you describe that for someone who have no idea?
Feeling safe, I'm going to say words that try not to listen with your mind, but listen with your body. Feeling safe is feeling whole, complete, a sense of belonging, open, engaged, and authentic. That's safety, emotional safety, and physical, of course, as well.
So as children, sometimes we're not allowed to say things because we are so suppressed if something is going on in our families. And I've seen one of my cousins who's growing up, their family was really volatile. So, and as he grew up, he had forgetfulness and he didn't even realize, right? Now we've grown up. I was talking to him and I was like, do you realize where all of that comes from? And he says, no. I was like, well, because unconsciously there was so much going on, although he said that he feels okay. He didn't feel unsafe, but unconsciously he had so many symptoms of forgetfulness and being frustrated and he's so nice, but comes one point where he's so frustrated and so mad. And so as an adult, how you cope with that?
Learning to even be aware you're having a feeling before you're spewing all the emotions. It sounds like you're using that example of your cousin, right? He's somebody who's been trained in ways that are both overt and subtle to keep things in. And it sounds like he's not even aware he's having a feeling until he's boiling over. So this is really common for many, many, many people because we were raised by a generation of adults who themselves didn't know how to be with feelings. So they asked us not to have feeling. And so what I try and teach people is noticing when they're starting to feel something before they hit that point of no return, that boiling over point. And can you even just name you're having a feeling? You don't need to have to know what the feeling is or the why of where it's coming from, but just noticing that there's something going on. And often there's this amazing thing that happens when we just even admit that we're having a feeling. It takes some of the pressure out of the feeling. It's like having a kettle and you lift the lid and some of the steam can pour out. It's a relieving experience to not deny, but instead tune in and just be aware that something's coming up. So for people, I just start really small. There's been many people I've worked with when, the classic, you sit down on my therapy couch and I say, how are you feeling? And they have no idea. And so what I found over time is we don't actually need the words. We do, though, need to be able to honor and acknowledge there's something going on that's moving us away from our center.
I'm sighing a lot because there's a lot of emotion involves with being anxiety, being anxious. People around me have been depressed. And the one thing sometimes they say is, "Oh, you don't understand me," or
Mhm.
"You will not get it." So what would be like response of a person who doesn't have it to somebody who's going
Right.
through that anxiety or overwhelm?
Well, I think the first thing is actually, you're right, I won't understand you, which sounds a little jarring, but it's true. We can never fully,
Yeah.
even as a clinical psychologist for all these years, I never fully know what somebody's going through because we have such different lived experiences that what they're experiencing in their mind and body is always going to be different from what I imagine is actually going on. And it's a disarming thing to say, but it's also true. You're right. I'm never going to totally understand what you're going through. And I'd like to hear. I'd just like to know what's going on and where you need support.
And we were talking about inner child and inner child work. What does that mean for somebody who's listening right now?
Such a big topic. It's something I teach 3-hour introductory workshops on just to even begin. But the idea is when we're kids, and this is like prior to the age of, let's say, 7 or 8, we're so open and vulnerable that the experiences we take in create imprints on us that we carry into our adult lives. So if you're using the example of a child who learned in their early years not to express their feelings,
Yeah.
they carry that child with them into adulthood. And when they're starting to feel a feeling, that child within says, no, 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 we're not allowed to feel this. Rather than the adult who might instead say, actually, you're not living in that home anymore. It's safe now. You can feel. That child is taking the lead and directing the choices. So whenever I'm doing inner child work, I couple it with also developing what we call the wise adult, the adult who can listen to the child's worries, who can listen to the child's belief, and provide, first of all, witnessing and compassion, and second of all, a different possibility. The wise adult might say to that inner child, maybe it's safe now to feel your feelings.
Is that sitting in a meditation or taking quiet time and going back and thinking of you as a child? Is that?
There's there are beautiful inner child meditations out there that people can find online, and it's a really amazing way to start. Also, there are many therapists who are trained in different ways. It's called different things now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk around like IFS and parts work where there's a lot of overlap, but it's noticing whenever you feel triggered and finding that part of yourself within that has a belief that might not be accurate in the adult. So anytime you're triggered, you can go inward and try and connect to your inner child because they're in there
Yeah.
anytime you're triggered.
So, like, okay, let's take an example of a child who was left alone at home and he
Yeah.
was worried when the parents going to come back. So, I feel like the feeling of insecurity would come as an adult, but how now you would go back and fix that?
So if I was working with this kind of person, I would first try to connect to them as a child. What did that child feel when they were left alone? Which is usually fear is underneath for the kids who are left a lot. And also maybe feeling like I'm not important enough for people to be here. And that's the insecurity you're speaking to. And then connect the adult. What is it like for you today when you feel lonely? What I would probably hear if someone hasn't done much of their work is, well, what can I do? I'm alone, I'm lonely, and they might drop into some form of powerlessness because that's how children feel.
Yeah.
Resourcing to say, forget this, I'm going to go get in my car and go find some people to hang out with and connect with the world. So the adult might carry that child's sense of, well, there's nothing I can do, so I have to just be in this feeling. And that's where someone might begin down a road of depression. There's nothing I can do. I'm stuck in this feeling. I'm powerless.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to show that adult, you're not that under-resourced child anymore. You can pick up the phone. You can write an email. You can make a gesture of connection in different ways. You're not that kid who really didn't have any choices.
And Dr. Kelly, I also have done some, inner child meditation. So what I did was like I went back and I held myself, like I hugged myself when I felt unsafe or felt alone and or needed somebody in that moment. And I'm like, okay, I'm here for you.
Right.
And you don't need to feel the way you're feeling because you have me. And it sometimes you can even I have cried,
Yeah.
right? And you will have these emotions coming up so you're full. And when I've cried and sometimes like so much too, and after that I feel so much better because now that I've processed that emotion, that feeling, and that made me a better human being. But before realizing that, I was so frustrated,
Mm,
angry, and like sometimes my husband would say something to me, he would be like, why do you feel that way? Right. Like, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, you asked
mm,
me why it's an interesting question, right? I feel like we
right.
don't even ask ourselves these questions. Like, why am I behaving this way? Like, where is that anger stemming from? Or where, like, for me, it was like, if you'd tell me something, it's like he would say, it's my way or the highway. I was like, okay, because I feel like I wasn't able to say it. So as an adult, I'm like, okay, it's just going to be my way. Like there is no say. You have no say in this. And I worked on that and I was like,
Mm,
okay, so, where does it come from? Why do I feel this way? And what are the emotions that come with it? And today, this is the second time I was reading this book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Unwavering Power of Focus by Dandapani. And he was mentioning the mind and the awareness. They're two things. He's like, it's not one thing. And your awareness travels to different parts. It's like, so that your mind is like a mansion and your awareness is like different rooms. So you like shift in different rooms. So it's on you which room you want to stay in. I was like, wow, I've never looked at it in that way before. So you talk about
right.
awareness so much. What is your approach?
Well, I first want to reflect back the beautiful work you're doing,
Mhm.
right? You're becoming
Yeah.
that inner child's wise adult and compassionate parent and feeling the relief. And you can even laugh now, remembering that, which means you really completed that cycle of emotion. You
Yeah.
moved it through and you allowed it to come up and had that little moment of healing just
Mhm.
to mirror back that you're
Yeah.
doing really beautiful work inward. So when we talk about awareness, it's gotten most of the attention on awareness of thought, awareness of the mind. But what we can know in the mind is literally the tip of the iceberg as far as what's actually going on within. And part of the reason is we have learned we only have awareness of 10% consciously of what's going on inward. So there's all these other, let's call it 90% forces shaping us. So one of the reasons I've stepped away from talk therapy, I still do some of it, but I'm moving more towards the work we're doing at our holistic center is let's bring awareness to the body. Let's
Mhm.
bring awareness to our soul selves because there's so much information there as well. And we can direct awareness beyond thought,
Yeah.
beyond what we can know in the mind.
Mm.
And that to me is the new era of healing. We're not just being aware of what we're thinking, we're being aware of what's happening somatically and what's actually being whispered to us through intuition, our
Mhm.
inner wisdom.
Yeah. And in the book, he also mentions so we have three levels of mind, and he talks about the conscious awareness and subconscious and then superconscious.
Mm,
So you have to go through the one level to this next. You cannot just go through third floor. You have to
right.
go to the first floor first, and then all of the subconscious mind when you practice things. And then the superconscious is your intuition, like you're listening. And I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful way to put it and like you said, intuition. So, what do you want to say about intuition?
So there's so much to say about intuition, but it's basically the part of us that knows without knowing. The part where your husband asks, what's going on? And maybe you say, I don't know, but I do know something's off. That's intuition. You don't necessarily have to mentally understand to be led by wisdom within. So I'm sure people can come up with at least one example of a time when they've made a decision from maybe what they call a gut feeling.
Yeah.
That's intuition. I believe intuition is us having a radio antenna that can hear what you're talking about as the superconscious, the soul self. It's like the higher self's wisdom that's so much greater than what the mental self can know. And so one of the ways we connect to intuition is we quiet the mind a little bit and we start to be led by an inner pull that's subtle, but when you spend time developing intuition, it becomes really clear when things are in alignment or are not.
So, what can somebody do this week? Like a small step.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
feeling stuck, and how can they feel better? The first step towards more awareness.
Let's talk about it in the frame of intuition because it's fun and we can bridge those two topics. So, if someone is feeling stuck in what they're hoping is to develop more consciousness expansion, more expanded awareness, you can start with something as simple as the choices you make when you're eating. What food do I want to have today for lunch?
Yeah.
And maybe you have to close your eyes and take a few breaths and begin the practice of listening to what your needs and desires are from a place that's beyond shoulds, right? From a place that's beyond kind of external instruction. So maybe a should today is I should have a salad. Yeah, maybe that would be really good for you. But why don't you take a minute, close your eyes, and ask your body what you actually want to eat? And whenever I suggest this to people, their usual response is it's going to be bread and pasta and
Yeah.
chocolate. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. And what happens is usually that's the first layer,
Yeah.
that like want layer, but underneath want is need. What would actually nourish me right now? What do I actually need? And one of the ways we get unstuck is by nourishing ourselves with what we really need, not giving ourselves what we think we want. Wants are fine if we're like a little curious about them and find out where they're coming from, but needs are what actually get us unstuck, having our needs met. So start it with food. Start it with food choices. Do I want to drink water or tea? Do I want to have a salad or fruit? Whatever it might be, start there. You start to learn the language of your body and also the language of intuition when you listen in a different way.
Amazing. Okay. And I want to talk to you about psychedelic assisted therapy, and you have been assisting people for many years. So, my first question is, what does the process look like? Is there any protocol do we have to follow? And like I know about the lion's mane mushrooms, but is there also other things like other mushrooms or other psychedelics that you can use? And the second question is, how is it different from the recreational drugs?
So I'm in the state of California. Right now, in the state of California, the only psychedelic that is legal for anyone to work with for healing is ketamine.
Okay.
So that's one category. It's a really beautiful medicine when used intentionally.
Yeah.
But the other psychedelics that are getting the most focus in the research right now are psychedelic mushrooms, so psilocybin mushrooms, and then also MDMA, which many people have a conditioning of remembering it being like a club drug or a party drug, but it's actually a really beautiful medicine for helping people do things like work through trauma. Yes, there's many protocols when psychedelics are used within the framework of psychedelic-assisted therapy, which is very different from recreational use. Recreational use tends to be taken in a group setting, some are beautiful, maybe around music, to open up sensory experiences, to open up connection. Psychedelic assisted therapy tends to shift the focus from the outward experience of beauty or music or connection to loved ones and move it inward to the relationship with self. So when people are engaged in psychedelic therapy, usually it's in a really beautiful, warm, controlled environment.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're wearing an eye mask to further position the focus inward so they're not being distracted by the external.
Yeah.
Intentions and goals are talked about clearly prior. Hopefully, they're sitting with someone who's has a lot of integrity because when people are in psychedelics, they're very open
Mhm.
and suggestible.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, if done the way I believe psychedelic assisted therapy is best facilitated on the back end after the psychedelic experience, they're engaging in what's called integration,
Oh,
making
yeah.
meaning, creating actual lasting change from the experience. So they're not just going, having an interesting
Mm.
experience of being altered and then returning back to life as it was. There's preparation, then the medicine session, and then a lot of integration on the back end so people
Right.
can really be changed. Otherwise, it's like you're just seeking an interesting experience without doing the work on the back end to let yourself shift because of that.
Yeah, I know there could be like different personalities, but what is like a general idea of like how long does it take for someone like being depressed to feel like more normal?
When engaged with psychedelic assisted
Mhm.
therapy. So what we're seeing in the research is like you're suggesting, it's an incredible range.
Okay.
Especially right now, I'm gonna actually talk about the research being done with I'm not gonna talk about ketamine because there's more of a buildup you need to do with ketamine, but let's take mushrooms or
Yeah.
MDMA. There are people where it is a one-time experience, and in that one depth experience, they're able to achieve the transformation they wish to achieve,
Okay.
whatever that might be, symptom management, living a more authentic and expanded life, whatever it might
Mhm.
be. And then there's people who in the research seems like they get some sort of benefit, but
Mm.
it's not the whole picture. But even for those people, it tends to open doors and catalyze change
Yeah.
quicker than talk therapy or other forms of healing on their own. I when I'm talking to people who are curious about it, I give a lot of caveats because it's getting a lot of attention as something that's this incredible tool, which it is,
Yeah.
but there's certain people where it's a better fit for and other people where it might not be the right time or situation to be engaged. But hopefully, if people are going to folks in the space who are trained, they're getting vetted and making sure it's a really good fit.
Yeah, like I have seen people like trying their own things. They get these mushrooms or they get these psychedelics, but they try to experiment on their own. They're like, okay, I know it's one day off. Oh, I've done my research, so I'm going to follow that. What would be your suggestion to these people?
I never want to tell anyone,
Okay.
I don't want to take away anyone's right to make their choices, whatever it might be.
Okay.
And I will say, I've heard and helped people work through experiences that were less controlled, less intentional, where a lot of their stuff came up and they didn't have someone there who could help them feel
Process.
safe and
Mhm.
move it through. And so
Wow.
if again, if people are feeling called and they want to experiment, that's their, I believe, prerogative and right. But I typically recommend people first try
Yeah.
these experiences above ground legally with a clinician who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and I get you there because yes, you can go through all of that, but what comes after that? And you said you talked about integration. That
Mhm.
is also important. Slowly taking all of that. And if there's emotion coming up, processing that. And you have started your own community, Wellspring. So, how
Mhm.
does that work? How do people come in there? What kind of experience they can have once they walk into the studio?
I'm really proud of Wellspring. It's a center where we integrate all kinds of modalities that
Mhm.
are meant to help people do just what we've been talking about in this conversation,
Yeah.
drop underneath the layers of the mind and the conditioning and tune into their deeper authentic selves. So we have things here, it's like a gym for the soul. We have daily classes like breath work and
Mhm.
meditation and sound baths where people can come be in community,
Mhm.
engaged in really deep practices, and have not only the modality feeding them, but also the community aspect. And that's another limitation I feel with talk therapy is it's beautiful to have a relationship with a therapist.
Mm.
It's so powerful to feel held by a community of people when we're doing deep work.
Yeah.
And then at Wellspring, we have workshops where I teach about different psychological tools. We weave in spiritual arts and spiritual wisdom. So it's a true blending of mind, body, spirit,
Yeah.
which really is the new era of transformation. Not just body, not just mind,
Yeah.
all of it,
Oh.
including our spiritual selves.
And where is it situated, Kelly?
We're located in Redondo Beach, California. So
California.
we're also in a beautiful location, half a block from the beach.
Oh, that's amazing. I've been to California a few times and I love the weather, I love the people. It's so nice. And whenever I look at the rain here, I'm like, I wish I was living in California.
Yeah, I'm looking at a blue sky right now.
Yeah,
It's really
exactly.
beautiful.
Exactly. So that's amazing, Dr. Kelly. Thank you for coming in our studio. And I loved today's conversation and all the information that you have given us. I hope it helped our listeners. And thank you, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you. It was lovely.